My name is not being disclosed because even today I live in the same city, and for certain reasons, mentioning that hostel or that building is not appropriate for me. Just understand that the incident took place near a large government hospital in Multan, in an old, almost abandoned women's hostel. I went there not by choice but out of necessity. At that time, I was undergoing training and needed a place with low rent. The better, more populated hostels near the hospital were beyond my budget. A senior told me about an old building on the back side where a few rooms were still rented out. The building was formerly called a hostel, but the truth is that it was not fully inhabited. The ground floor was half closed. In two rooms, old cleaning supplies were stored. Sometimes someone would come and go. On the upper floor, the number of permanent residents could be counted on one's fingers. The rent was low, the hospital was close, and initially I thought the silence would be good for studying. That was my first mistake. My room was at the far end of the upper floor. A long corridor in front, my door on the right, and behind the room a window that opened toward the back of the building. Beyond that window was a narrow, empty plot, then a broken wall, and behind the wall a cemetery. During the day it just looked like an ordinary old cemetery. But at night, you didn't feel like looking in that direction. The reason was not the cemetery itself. The reason was the silence that spread around it. That silence was not ordinary silence, the kind in which you could hear even the faint clink of a water glass in your room. The first week I kept telling myself that everything was new, which was why it felt strange. The building was old. The doors were wooden. The pipes were old. There was dampness in places, so hearing sounds was normal. I was not the kind of girl who saw a ghost in everything. At first I found an ordinary explanation for everything, and that is why for a long time I did not realize the seriousness of what was happening to me. My routine was simple: hospital in the morning, back in the afternoon or evening, food, notes, then sleep, because the building was mostly empty. So the first few days actually felt peaceful. No noise, no girls shouting, no sound of doors closing late at night. Just me, my room, and that window beyond which nothing was clearly visible after dark. The first strange incident started with my phone, but it was not so big that I would be immediately scared. One night I returned from duty very tired. My phone was on charge. I changed my clothes, sat on the bed, and started drinking water. At that moment my eyes fell on the phone. The screen was lit, and in the gallery a new photo existed. I opened the photo. It was of my room, taken from an angle as if someone was standing near the door. In the frame, my bag was on one side of the bed and a book was on the table. At first glance, I thought perhaps I had taken it by mistake. That had happened before. I deleted the photo and that was that. 2 days later, it happened again. This time I was in the photo. I was sitting at the table writing notes and the photo was taken from another corner of the room. At that time, there was no one else in my room. The door was locked from inside. The window was closed. I got up and searched the whole room but found nothing. Still, I quickly convinced myself that perhaps there was a fault in the phone. Cheap mobiles sometimes do strange things. At the time, I thought that. The next day, I went to a mobile shop and had the phone checked. The boy looked at it and said it might be a software issue. Reset the phone, delete unnecessary things. The problem would be fixed. I followed his advice. After that, a few days passed in peace. But then one night, something happened that made me completely uneasy for the first time. I was sleeping when my eyes opened to a faint sound, as if someone had taken a soft step inside the room. Not the full sound of footsteps, just a light pressure on the floor, like a subtle rustle. I did not sit up immediately. First, I stayed still and listened. The room was dark. Only a faint yellow light from outside came through the edge of the curtain. After a few seconds, I thought I had misheard. But then, on the floor to the right of my bed, there was another very faint sound, as if someone's foot had lightly scraped the dry floor. I sat up straight. The room was empty. I immediately turned on the light. The door was locked from inside. The window was closed. The bathroom was empty. I even checked under the bed, nothing. I stayed awake for a long time. Then I told myself that it was an old building, wood, dampness, pipes, all those sounds combined to create such things. But the next morning, a new photo was in my phone. It was a picture of my sleeping face. Not very close, but close enough that it was clear. The photo had not been taken by accident from my pocket or bed. The angle was from the right side of the bed, exactly the direction from which I had heard the sound the night before. This was the first time real panic rose inside me. That day at the hospital I could not feel at ease. My mind kept going back there. Still, I wanted to act logically. I considered two possibilities. Either someone was actually entering my room, or there was some issue with the phone that I did not understand. Fear made the first thought heavier, so I clung to the second. I started checking the door latch myself. After locking it at night, I would check again. I would check the window twice. Instead of keeping my phone near the bed, I put it on the table. 3 nights passed with nothing. I thought perhaps I had been worrying without reason. Then another night came, one that I could not explain away with ordinary reasons. I fell asleep early. I do not know how much later, but my sleep was broken by a strange feeling. I felt something lightly touch near my hair, not as if someone had stroked it hard, just as if a strand of hair had been brushed by a finger or the edge of cloth. But this time I did not move immediately. I lay still for a few moments. My breath slowed. My heart was beating fast. Then I felt something very light but clear. On the side of the bed where no one usually sat, there was a weight. Very light, not enough to press the whole mattress, but enough to feel a difference on the surface. As if someone had not sat down but carefully perched on the edge. At that moment I turned on the light. The room was empty, but my blanket was slightly depressed on that side. I put my hand there. The mattress really was a little lower there. A few seconds later, the surface returned to normal. I could have told myself that the mattress was old, that the pressure was an illusion. But the truth was that I had felt that difference under my palm. I did not sleep that night. In the morning, I told my old classmate, Anam, everything. I showed her the phone photos, told her about the night sounds, and told her about feeling weight on the bed. Anam listened carefully. She did not immediately dismiss me, but she said something that was both logical and frightening. She said, "It's possible someone has an old key to the building. You need to find out whether the problem is really someone coming in or just your own feelings." That evening, Anam came to my room. She examined the room, the door, the latch, the window, the far end of the corridor. Then she said she would stay one night with me. If something ordinary was happening, we would both reach the same conclusion. If something unusual, at least I would not be alone. That night Anam stayed with me. For the first 2 hours nothing happened. We chatted normally. Then we turned off the light and lay down. I was awake. Anam was not fully asleep either. The night had advanced considerably when we heard a faint sound like someone walking, a step, a pause, then another. Not loud steps, but soft and deliberate, as if someone was slowly approaching our room. We both fell silent. The sound came to our door and stopped. Nothing happened, no knock, no door movement. But after a while, Anam whispered in the dark, "You're awake, right?" I said yes. She said, "I feel like someone is in the room." Hearing that, ice ran down my spine, because I was feeling the same thing at that moment. I reached to turn on the light, but before that, I felt it again, not under the bed, but on the bed, as if someone had very softly placed weight near my feet. We both sat up immediately. We turned on the light. The room was empty. But this time there was something new. A new photo was in my phone. In that photo, we were both sitting up on the bed as if startled by something. The angle was from inside the room, and behind the curtain, a faint white edge was visible. No clear face, but enough to silence us both. At that moment, Anam said for the first time, "This is no longer just about the phone or building sounds." I asked, "Then what?" She could not answer immediately. After that night, I accepted that the matter was serious, but I still was not ready to call it fully paranormal. I wanted to find a logical reason for everything. The next day we went a look at that part of the corridor. We spoke to the watchman downstairs. I asked if anyone else had keys to the upstairs. He clearly said that no one even came to that section. At night, he locked the outer door from below. I did not lie, but I did not tell him everything. I just said that strange sounds came from upstairs. He looked at me strangely. Then he just said, "People do not stay long in the rooms on the back side." I asked why. He said, "Too much silence. People get scared." The answer was direct, but there was something hidden in his tone. That night I was alone again. I decided that if anything happened, I would remember the sequence. I put my phone on the base, checked the door again, checked the window latch. I turned off the main light but left a small bulb on. Sleep came late and it was not deep. At some point in the night, my eyes opened because of something I can never forget. I clearly felt that behind me in the bed, someone else was lying. Not that I had seen anyone, my eyes were closed, but my body felt it. There was continuous weight on the back part of the mattress, not light but distinct, as if someone lay slightly turned behind me. I stayed completely still. My breaths were so fast I could feel them, and behind my neck I felt someone else's breath. Not warm, not cold, just deliberate, close, and not my own. I did not try to scream. It was as if I was in that state where the voice stops. I jerked myself forward, turned on the light, and almost jumped off the bed. The room was empty, but the sheet on that side of the bed was indeed pressed down, as if someone had just gotten up. At that same moment, my phone screen lit up. A new photo. With trembling hands, I picked it up. The photo showed my bed. I was curled forward, and behind me, a part of the blanket was raised as if another body really lay there. I could not look at that photo for more than a few seconds. That night I called Anam. She was staying in a friend's room on the lower floor. She came up immediately. She saw the photo, looked at the bed, and for the first time she did not just comfort me. She clearly said, "You are not staying alone here tonight." I picked up a small bag and went with her. But as I left, I turned once to look at my room. The door was open. The light was on. The bed was rumpled. The curtain was completely still. And for some reason at that moment, I felt for the first time that whatever it was had not just been scaring me, it was making me used to its presence. After that night, I decided in my heart that I would leave the room. The problem was that leaving was not so easy. The building had few permanent girls, but good empty rooms were not available. The 2 rooms on the ground floor were closed. One stored old things. In the front section, 2 girls lived, but their room already had 2 beds filled. Anam said she would keep me in her room for a few nights, then we would find a solution. I went with her. But the truth is that after that night, everything inside me had changed. Earlier, I was afraid in my own room. Now I was afraid of being alone. Anam's room was better than mine. It was in the middle section of the building. The back window did not open toward the cemetery, and the corridor there seemed relatively more populated. During the day, I really felt that perhaps the problem was the old room. Its silence, its loneliness, and my constant solitude were making things worse. I wanted this matter to end like that. I kept telling myself that fear might be attached to the place, and changing the place would fix everything. The first night, indeed, nothing happened. No sounds, no photos, no smell, no weight on the bed. I slept straight for a few hours after a long time. In the morning, Anam said lightly, "See, maybe it was just that room." I nodded, but my heart was not fully convinced. The reason was simply that the last photo, the one with the raised blanket, was still saved in my phone. I wanted to delete it, but I could not. I felt that if I deleted the photos, later I would start convincing myself that I had exaggerated. The next day after duty, I went to my old room just to pick up some remaining things. It was daytime, so I thought my fear would be less. When I opened the door, everything was ordinary: the bed, the table, the bag, the books. In daylight, that room seemed even more ordinary. The worst thing about such places is that the fear of night changes its shape in the day, and a person starts doubting himself. I quickly packed a few clothes and notes. During that, my eyes fell on the table. There was an old rubber band of mine that I always used to tie my hair. I picked it up, and under it was a fine damp stain, not perfectly round, just faintly spread. I stared at it for a long time. Then I told myself that perhaps water had spilled from a bottle, just moisture, but the rest of the table was dry. Only that small spot where the rubber band lay was damp. I took those things and quickly left. That night I was again in Anam's room. We deliberately talked about light things to keep the atmosphere normal. She advised me to ignore my phone for a while. Checking it every 5 minutes does not reduce fear, it increases it. I understood what she meant, but following it was hard. Still, I turned my phone face down on the base and tried to sleep. The night had passed more than halfway when my eyes opened. This time there was no sound, no footsteps, no smell immediately felt. My eyes just opened suddenly, as if my body had reacted to something that had just happened, but not in the form of a sound. I lay still for a few moments. Then I felt a light tug near the sleeve of my left arm, as if someone had touched the edge of the cloth and let go. I sat up at once. Anam was sleeping. The room was quiet. I did not turn on the light immediately. I just sat and listened. Then, from the corner of the room, I heard a very faint breath-like sound, so soft that if I had not been fully awake, I might not have heard it. I turned on the light. The room was empty, but the phone screen was lit. A new photo. I picked up the phone and opened it. This time the photo was of Anam's room, but the angle was from near the floor, as if something low had looked upward. In the photo, part of my bed was visible, part of Anam's bed, and in the corner of the frame, a faint white blurry piece, like a fine edge of cloth brought very close. I woke Anam immediately. She sat up, looked at the photo, and for the first time clear fear appeared on her face. She checked every part of the room, the door, the window. Then she sat silently with the phone for a long time. Finally, she said very softly, "This thing has come with you." I had felt that at the time, but hearing it from her made it heavier. Meaning, the problem was not limited to my old room. Either the phone was carrying the problem, or the problem was carrying me. The next day I tried to convince myself, if there is a fault in the phone, it could create such photos in any room, so I took it to another shop. There, a relatively knowledgeable boy examined the phone from scratch. He said that if photos were being taken automatically, the kind of angles I described did not match that issue. He advised resetting the phone. I backed everything up and reset it. For a few hours, I really thought the problem would end. But that night, another thing happened that weakened the possible explanation. I was sitting in Anam's room, both of us awake. It was around 11:30 p.m. Anam was reading and I was combing my hair. My phone was lying on the bed, clean after the reset. No unnecessary files, no old issue. Suddenly I felt a very light cold breeze behind my neck. The fan was off. The window was closed. I turned immediately, but nothing was there. I thought perhaps it was just due to moisture. I turned back and Anam said, "Why did you turn just now?" I said, "I felt something near my neck." She looked at me for a few moments. Then she said, "I just felt the same thing." Hearing that, the cold panic spread inside me again. At that same moment, the phone screen lit up. It was right in front of us. No one had touched it. We both saw with our own eyes that a notification for a new photo arrived. I opened the photo immediately. This time, the photo showed me combing my hair and Anam sitting with a book. That meant this photo was taken just moments ago, and the angle was as if from inside the room, directly behind us. We both turned to look behind us. There was only a wall. No one could stand there. No one could take a photo from that angle. It was the first time I felt not only fear, but also helplessness. Because the problem was no longer just that something was happening. The problem was that it was happening beyond the limits of our understanding. Anam said that night that we should speak to a senior. I hesitated because I was afraid people would make fun of me or think I was weak-hearted. But now the photos were no longer just my word. Anam had seen them herself. She had felt something herself. The next day she spoke to her senior, Nabila Appa. Nabila had been living in that building for a long time, though in the more populated front section. She was not the kind of woman to say unnecessary scary things. She listened to everything silently, looked at the photos on my phone, and did not jump to any strange conclusion. She asked one question: "Which room were you in first?" I gave her the room number. She was silent for a few moments. Then she said, "Complaints have come before from that type of room, but photos like these I am hearing for the first time." I immediately asked, "What kind of complaints?" She said, "Mostly that at night someone feels like someone is walking. Someone stops outside the door and then leaves. The presence of someone near the window is felt. Most girls just change rooms, so the matter does not go further." Hearing that gave me some relief that I was not the first, and also increased my fear, because it meant that something unusual had been felt in that section before. That same night, Nabila Appa said she would sit with us for a while. The three of us sat in Anam's room. My phone was on the table. The light was dim. The door was locked from inside. Nabila was talking in a normal tone, but her eyes kept looking at different parts of the room, as if she was trying to sense the atmosphere. At first, nothing happened. Then around 1 a.m. that smell began, faint like wet earth but distinct. I sat up straight. Anam immediately looked at me. Nabila fell silent. For a few moments the three of us only listened to our breaths. Then from the edge of my bed, not from under it, a very light pressure movement was felt. I flinched. Nabila immediately asked, "Where?" I pointed to the right edge of my bed. At that same moment the phone screen lit up. A new photo. Nabila herself picked up the phone and opened the photo. This time, all three of us were in the photo, me, Anam, and Nabila. But the angle was as if something had leaned very close to us. And for the first time, in the lower part of the photo, along with a white blur, a thin, dark line like black hair was visible. Seeing that, I felt a jolt in my heart. This was no longer just shadows or angles. A presence was beginning to take shape. Nabila looked at the photo for a long time. Then she said softly, "This thing is reducing distance." I asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "First from the room, then to the bed, then to the side next to you, then to another room, and now directly close to you. This is not a series of unrelated incidents. It is a sequence of coming closer." Hearing that, the cold fear inside me deepened even more. That night, after Nabila Appa said the words "sequence of coming closer," I could not sleep. Anam stayed awake with me. We did not turn off the light. The phone lay on the table, screen down. No new notification came. But the silence of the room was different now, heavier, as if something was listening. The next morning, Nabila Appa decided that we needed to find out everything we could about the old part of the building and that room. She said that one thing was becoming clear. This was not random. There was a pattern. And if there was a pattern, perhaps there was a starting place. That afternoon, the three of us went to the section where the building almost ended, the backside where rooms were rarely used. Even in daylight, that part felt different from the rest of the hostel. The corridor became narrower. The walls had old damp stains. The floor lacked the cleanliness of the inhabited section. The silence there was also different, not ordinary silence, but the silence of a place where life once was and then slowly faded. Beyond my old room there was a turn. After that turn on the right were two old doors. One was always locked. The other had perhaps once been used as a store. I had never gone to that section before, simply because I never needed to. But now, standing there, I understood why the atmosphere of the whole building was not uniform. The front section was inhabited, but this back part, even though part of the building, never fully felt like it belonged. Nabila Appa had already spoken to the watchman downstairs and obtained the key. While giving the key, he had said something that sounded strange then and still stays with me. He said, "If you want to see old things, look, but do not stay long inside." When Nabila asked why, he brushed it off, saying, "It's just a closed space. You feel suffocated." But his tone did not carry ordinary carelessness. It was something else. The key did not fit the first door or the second. It opened a third door, one that was slightly set back. As the door opened, a stale smell came out. It was not exactly the smell I had felt at night, but it was close, a mix of old wood, closed cloth, dampness, and earth. Inside, the light was dim. For the first few moments, nothing was clear. Then slowly, things became visible. It was an old storeroom. There were broken chairs, two iron frames on one side, some boxes, old mattresses, and against the wall, a large wooden cupboard. That cupboard looked different from the rest of the items, not because of its condition, but because the dust on everything else was uniform except on the cupboard. There was less dust there, as if someone had stood near it at some point. I stopped as soon as I saw it. I do not know why, but looking at that cupboard, for the first time, my mind connected my own bed, my phone, the photos, and the feeling of someone lying behind me. Anam also noticed it immediately. "This looks used," she said. Nabila Appa did not say anything. She went closer and ran her hand along the wooden edge of the door. Then she pointed to a spot. There were 3 fine scratches on the wood. I immediately said, "There were similar scratches on the window frame of my old room." I remembered finding new lines on the wooden edge of my window. It could have been a coincidence, but at that moment, every coincidence carried weight. Anam opened one door of the cupboard. Inside, there were not many things. At the top, an old rolled-up mattress, 2 folded clothes, a rusted small box, and at the bottom, a wrapped white cloth, not truly white but old and dusty, though it still felt like it had once been something used by a woman, perhaps a sheet or a dupatta. Nabila Appa carefully lifted the cloth. Beneath it was a small cloth bag. On the bag, a letter was hand-stitched, an old, faded scene, the Urdu letter for S. We all fell silent for a moment. I immediately looked at Anam. That was the initial of the girl whose record we had found earlier, Samina. Nabila Appa opened the bag. Inside were 3 things: a small broken comb, an old rubber band, and a folded piece of paper. My breath stopped. Seeing the rubber band reminded me of the damp stain on my table under my own rubber band. Perhaps it was not the same, but at that moment it felt like these were not just old abandoned items, they were leftover pieces of an ongoing sequence. Nabila opened the paper. It was not fully intact, but enough to understand. The writing was hurried. Some words had smudged from moisture, but what could be read sent a chill down my spine. The first line said, "At first I thought someone stood outside the window, then the sound started coming from inside, and now when I sleep, a space is made behind me on the bed." I read that line again, then a third time. My fingers went genuinely cold, because this was exactly what was happening to me. The phone photos, the pressure on the bed, the breath near my hair, the feeling of someone lying behind me, none of this was new. Samina had gone through the same sequence. Anam said softly, "Meaning this all happened to her too." Nabila turned the paper. Only half a sentence was legible. "Even if I leave," the rest was torn. But that half sentence stuck in my mind immediately. Even if I leave. Even if I leave what? The room, the hostel, then what? The silence in the room became unbearably heavy. Then my eyes fell on the lower part inside the cupboard. On the wooden floor, a spot was relatively cleaner, as if something had been kept there for a long time. Beside it lay a small mirror with a broken edge. I immediately remembered that Nabila Appa had asked me earlier whether I had a mirror in my room. Samina's note had also mentioned a mirror. I said softly, "This could be hers too." Nabila picked up the mirror and looked at it for a few moments. There was less dust on it, the same pattern we had been noticing. Things stored in a closed space, yet appearing as if they had been touched occasionally. Anam said, "We should not leave all this here." Nabila immediately shook her head. "No, especially not this paper." Standing in that room, I realized that the fear I felt was not just because we had found Samina's things. It was because everything was arranged in an order: the window, the sounds, the bed, the hair, the breath, the mirror. As if a sequence had already played out with her, remained incomplete, and then started again with me. We took the paper, the rubber band, and the small cloth bag. Nabila kept the broken mirror with her. The cupboard was closed again. But as we left that section, I kept feeling that we had not just taken some items. We had brought the last thread of an unfinished story with us. That evening, the three of us sat in the room and read Samina's note again, as much as was clear. From what we could understand, one thing became almost certain. Samina had left the hostel. But before that, she had realized that the problem was no longer limited to her room. And then I remembered the last line of her note. Even if I leave. I was silent for a long time. Then I said what became the real turning point of this whole incident. I said, I think she left out of fear, but the matter did not end. Anam asked, then what? I said, then perhaps this thing attaches itself to a place, to a new attention. First with Samina, then with whoever was the next vulnerable person in that section. If she left it incomplete, the matter did not stop there. It was waiting for the next similar situation. Hearing this, Nabila Appa immediately looked at me. That similar situation, she asked. I said the last room, living alone, the side facing the cemetery, the silence of the night, keeping the phone closed, and slowly feeling that someone is not just scaring you, someone is watching. Silence spread in the room. At that moment, my phone's screen lit up faintly. A new photo. The three of us looked at the phone together. I opened the photo. This time the photo was not of any room. It only showed a bed. Not my old bed, not Annam's bed. Another bed, old, blurred, on it part of a white cloth, and near the pillow scattered lines of hair. I said softly, this might be Samina's bed. Annam asked, how do you know? I said, I don't, but it is not from any room of ours. In the lower part of the photo there was another thing. A hand, not fully, just the upper part of fingers. Very blurred, but enough to recognize a shape. This was the first time something resembling a physical body part had appeared in the photos. There had been shadows, edges of cloth, white blurs, now fingers. If this sequence continued, the next step would be clearer. I made a decision right there. I said, I am not sleeping here tonight, and I am not keeping my phone with me. Nabila asked, then what will we do? I took Samina's note in my hand. Then I looked at the broken mirror, then at the photos on my phone. Then I said softly, we have to accept that this thing is getting stronger from my fear. I have been moving back every night, changing places, but it keeps coming closer. If this is connected to Samina leaving things incomplete, perhaps it will only stop when someone does not run away but faces it. Anam asked how. I did not answer immediately, but one thing had become clear in my mind. This thing never showed itself directly. It used angles, sleep, weak moments, and the bed. And the mention of the mirror in Samina's note could not be a coincidence. I said, tonight, we will do something with the mirror. That night, Nabila Appa told us clearly that guessing would not help anymore. If this sequence had truly been continuing since Samina's time, then we would have to stop it from where it kept coming closer. Her tone suggested that she was not hearing all this for the first time. She did not admit it, but she did say that something similar had happened with another girl before, and at that time, every elder woman had advised a simple practice. The mirror should not face directly, the light should not be too low, and whatever forces you to keep looking should be faced in silence, not by turning away. The three of us did exactly that. Only one bulb was on in the room. My phone was placed on the table. The part of Samina's note that we had was also kept in front. Nabila Appa did not clean the old mirror. She simply placed it facing us and said, if you see something, do not panic. Do not scream immediately. Do not step back. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then that faint smell of wet earth began to spread in the room. My breath quickened on its own. Anam held my hand. Nabila Appa started reciting something softly, not loud but continuous. Her voice was low but steady. The room had a strange silence. Her words, our breaths, and the distant faint sounds from outside were all separate and clear. Then for the first time something shifted in the mirror. At first, it seemed as if the light had flickered. Then a fog began to gather in the corner of the mirror, even though the room was not that damp. Inside that fog, slowly, a white patch formed. It did not immediately look like a human shape, just an indistinct reflection. But a few seconds later, its form began to change, as if someone was standing close to the mirror from the other side. I stayed sitting until then, but my whole body was tense. Nabila did not stop reciting. That white patch in the mirror became clearer for a moment. I did not see a full face, only that it was a male-like presence, a dark area near the head, and a light white part like cloth. It did not fully enter the mirror. It was as if seen from the edge. Then suddenly, a fine line appeared on the mirror from top to bottom like moisture from the inside. At that moment, my phone lit up. We all flinched, but Nabila gestured with her hand to not look away from the mirror. She continued reciting. After a few moments, the white patch began to fade. Slowly, the mirror returned to what it had been. The smell also lessened. The pressure in the room that I had been feeling for days became lighter. Then Nabila picked up the phone. A new photo had arrived. The photo showed the three of us, the table, the mirror. But this time, inside the mirror, that same white blurry shape was visible, exactly as we had seen moments before with our own eyes. That was the thing that, for the first time, made me feel that what was happening was not just a product of my mind or fear. After that night, the activity did not stop immediately. But one thing changed. The feeling of someone lying behind me in bed never returned. The sensation of someone touching my hair did not come back. No new strange photo appeared in my phone for the next 2 days. We could not say that everything had completely ended. The truth is that even we were not fully sure, but the intensity had stopped, and that was the most important thing. Despite that, I did not decide to stay there any longer. A few days later, I changed hostels. I told everyone the reason was that the building was too deserted and commuting was difficult. I did not tell the real reason to anyone except Anam and Nabila. I took my phone with me. For some time, the habit of covering the mirror before sleeping did not leave me. After that, nothing like that happened to me again. But even today, I cannot claim that the thing truly ended. Perhaps it was attached to that place. Perhaps it had reached me after Samina and then stayed there. Perhaps we had only turned its direction. I only know that that night something came in the mirror. The three of us saw it, and after that I left that hostel. If you liked this story, please like the video and leave a kind comment. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories of the strange and the unexplained. We will meet again, God willing, with another story.